Hello, this is Angelique with the Gaston County Public Library, and Kendall, Andrew, and I are back for another episode of We're Booked Up, a segment of the Gaston Speaks podcast wherein we discuss books. For this episode, we read In the Dream House, a nonfiction memoir by Carmen Maria Machado that recounts her experience as a domestic abuse survivor. As such, this book deals with some serious topics that we are in no way experts on, so take care with yourself before continuing. This discussion will have spoilers for the book. And also, a few of us are sick.
That would be me.
She also had an accident before.
That makes it sound like I peed my pants.
I know. I just wanted to see your reaction to it. She did not pee her pants. Okay, you can cut that out. But it was funny.
I did have 3 babies, so it's a possibility. But I spilled my coffee down my throat. That's just Kendall. Sorry.
I'm sorry. We can cut that out.
We don't. It's fine. I have no beef with that.
Fun.
I'm just feel bad for Angelique because
It's taken us like 45 minutes to get this thing
that's
started.
why I feel bad. Right.
Well, we haven't seen each other in a while. We
That's
That's
really
true.
true. Okay.
That's true.
like half of the reason we do this is to see each other.
I concur.
All right. But first, what have we been watching or reading?
You go first.
Okay.
Probably not much.
Not much. I'm trying to remember. So I did read another book. Well, I listened to another book. I listened to The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. It was so good. It was so good.
The movie's good too.
Yeah, I watched the movie. I actually watched the movie before I read the book. I know everyone's like, don't do that, but I will hate the movie otherwise.
Yeah.
I like the movie. The book is better.
It is better, yeah.
And honestly, I listened to it and the narrator did a great job. So, big fan. Okay, so I listened to The Hate You Give. What am I watching? My husband's finally catching up on Schitt's Creek.
Well, you know that's Angelique and I's
I know,
favorite thing
know.
ever. So
Well, I watched it the first, because of Angelique, and it was amazing. And so now I go back and watch little bits of that. And there is something that I'm watching right now on and off. I can't remember. We watch every She-Hulk.
is it good? Long
I think it's just because I'm over the Marvel stuff. I think it's a fine show. I don't like the criticisms of it. I don't care when they're like, she breaks the fourth wall. I'm like, I don't care. I think she's funny and does a great job.
Yeah.
So does Deadpool.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. She's trying to be like Deadpool. But the thing is, Marcus tells me she's not trying to be like Deadpool because she was written in 1970s.
Right.
So that's
There.
not the case. All right, Marcus is going to listen to this and be like, she explained it wrong. Okay,
If he
Andrew.
wants to come on and explain, he can.
Yeah, exactly.
There you go, Marcus.
Oh, me? Oh, it's me. So I rewatched recently The White Lotus because it won all the Emmys. And it's still just deliciously horrible and funny. And when by horrible, I mean the characters are horrible. The show is actually really well done. So that was fun to rewatch it. And then, what am I watching? Oh, I'm really just kind of gearing up for Friday because Hocus Pocus 2 comes out. So I'm just palate cleansing with like old Ina Garta episodes just to get ready, prepared for Hocus Pocus 2. So I'm really excited.
So I tried to show Wyatt Hocus Pocus, and for some reason, he just isn't into it, which surprises me because he loves Kid Macabre stuff. But he is obsessed with the zombie. He's like, when's the zombie coming, Billy?
Oh,
I'm like, you're missing the point.
I will say, as a child, you don't get the humor of it. As an adult, you realize how funny it is and how it's kind of like the kids don't get the humor. But, you know, when you go back, you're like, man, I'm glad I didn't get that as a kid. Because it was kind of like, but I love it. I mean, it's funny. It's just so funny. But, you know, I was scared of it as a kid. I was really, it terrified me. I'm not a horror person, so, when, he pops up or when, it scared me. Then as an adult, then I was like, oh, this is actually, funny. This is really, really funny. So.
It's more campy than, campy
yeah.
might be the wrong word. Campy's not
No,
right.
campy's a good word. I think that's why it's become such a classic because it's like a camp classic.
It's, fun.
Yeah.
It's spoopy.
It's what?
Spoopy. It's
Spoopy.
not creepy. It's not spooky. It's spoopy. This is a word that exists outside of
I'm
me.
sure it is. I just have never heard it
This is
until
not
right now.
This is not a chicken chunks moment. This is not something unique to Kendall.
Okay, okay. Spoopy.
Never heard of
Oh no, I've never heard of that. Oh, that made my day. All right. Anyway, Angelique, what are you watching?
What am I? Oh, I'm on to YouTube again. I want to be on my phone mostly, like going through like social media. So I'll turn on YouTube for background noise, and it's usually car crash videos right now.
What is wrong with you?
Dark. I mean, I'm trying not to judge you.
No, they're like dash cam videos from people's cars. So they're like seeing like idiot drivers kind of thing.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
that's.
I'm not like watching horrific car crashes. I don't want to watch that, but like.
I'm sitting here, I'm like, that's a level to you. I didn't.
Yeah, and it kind of makes you like back up the chair.
But.
Oh, I know something I watched. I forgot to mention. I watched the Bob's Burgers movie, and if
The
you are a Bob's
movie?
Burgers fan, that movie is fun. That was what I was gonna say, and then I forgot, and then we went off on Spoopy, and I got distracted.
Andrew, I'm going to need you to make me some hamburgers from the Bob's Burger cookbook.
Oh yeah, and they actually look good. Like
They
some of those
do.
burgers, like when you see his like daily specials or whatever, they look fun. Are you okay?
My glasses are so
Oh,
dirty,
okay.
especially after the coffee incident. Okay. Why is that so loud?
I don't know.
It's a paper towel. Sorry, there was like a smudge right where your
My
face goes
Oh.
from this angle on my glasses, and so it was like you were.
Spoopy.
Yes. Moving along.
Moving on. Are we ready to move on? Are we done
Yeah,
talking
let's do
about-
it. Yeah. let's-
Jeez, 45 minutes later. Sorry, audience.
All right, so I'll read the synopsis first, and I just want to point out that Kindle does have a different book again.
Do I really?
Yeah, you do.
I mean, yes.
You have the hardback. It might
Oh.
be a different like synopsis. I
I'll
don't
read
even know if-
along. Let's find out. Hang on, this is laughing is making me have to cough. Okay.
All right. Carmen Maria Machado's prismatic revolutionary memoir is an electrifying account of a relationship gone bad and a bold dissection of the mechanisms and cultural representation of psychological abuse. Each chapter is driven by its own narrative trope: the haunted house, erotica, the Bildungsroman, through which Machado holds her story up to the light while also casting a critical eye over legal proceedings, fairy tales, iconic works of film and fiction, and a broad swath of queer history. And the Dream House explodes our ideas about what a memoir can do and be. Was that the same?
Parts of it.
Parts of it?
Are you sure? Because
Okay, you read along while I read.
Okay.
You ready?
Okay.
All right. Sorry, let me just put the paper towels on the ground. Prismatic, engrossing, and wildly inventive. In The Dream House is Carmen Maria Machado's account of a relationship gone bad and a bold dissection of mechanisms and cultural representations of psychological abuse. Oh, that made me sound like I was making fun of psychological abuse. I'm sorry, I'm not. Machado traces the full arc of a harrowing relationship with a charismatic but volatile woman and struggles to make sense of how what happened for her shaped the person she was becoming. Each chapter in this inventive memoir is driven by its own narrative trope: the haunted house, erotica. What is this? The Bildungsroman?
Bildungsroman.
I had to look up what that word meant. Through which Machado holds up her story to the light and examines it from different angles. She considers her religious adolescence, unpacks the stereotype of lesbian relationships as safe and utopian, and widens the view with essayistic explorations of the history and reality. I don't know why I said that weird. And reality of abuse in queer relationships. Machado's dire narrative is leavened. Leavened? Is that in your book?
Leavened. No, Leaven's not in here. It's different.
So it really is different
Yeah.
this time. Leavened with her characteristic wit, playfulness, and openness to inquiry, she casts a critical eye over the legal proceedings, fairy tales, Star Trek, and Disney villains, as well as iconic works of film and fiction. The result is a wrenching, riveting book that explodes our ideas about what a memoir can do and be. It doesn't say explores, it says explodes.
Oh, really? Okay.
I didn't mess that up.
Okay. Clarification.
Oh, it does say explodes. Maybe I just misread it.
Did you say explode or explodes?
don't-
I didn't hear. I was too trying to catch up with where you were because bits of it are exactly the same and
Yeah.
bits of it are very.
Well, it says explodes on here, so if I said explodes, that's right.
Okay.
So it was different.
Yeah,
Ha!
it's longer too.
Okay, you're 1 and 1. Okay.
No, I'm 1 and 2.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yeah. That's right. Oh, yeah. Duh. Math is not my strong suit. So.
If you're gonna make fun of me, do it well.
Okay, so we will move on to ratings, and we'll start with Kindle.
4, but I'm never gonna read it again.
Ditto.
Yeah, same.
Ditto.
Really?
Yeah.
Across the
Maybe
board?
4.5. But yeah.
You have to explain some stuff to me for me to make it a 4.5, which I will raise it if I understand it better.
Well, it's like I always say that about movie. There have been certain movies where, like, remember the movie Precious, the Monique and Gabby,
Yes.
absolutely brilliantly done. We'll never watch it again. We're not laughing about Precious. We're laughing at Kendall.
It's not her day.
It's not her day.
We're happy she's here, though.
No, we are.
I'm sick, and it's very apparent.
Oh.
Anyway.
No, you're good.
I'm sorry, Precious.
That was. It's very. I mean, there's the whole abuse aspect of it, and that one, of course, is both physical and there's multiple layers. But it's the same thing. It's like what?
I just realized I could hear myself breathing, and I looked back at Angelique, and she's leaned back so far away from the mic.
Don't worry about your breathing. I actually cut that out.
Okay,
Yes.
Andrew, you were talking about Precious and how there is physical and psychological abuse.
No, I was just saying that it's the same thing. It's like I saw the movie. I understand why it was successful. I, hooped and hollered when Monique won her Oscar because, oh my God, does she deserve it? I will never watch that movie again. And that's how I feel about this. It's like you need to read it because I think it's important.
Yeah.
And I think that it's also groundbreaking in a lot of ways, just in the way that it's written, But yeah, it's also hard. It's perfect for October because it really is a horror book in a way that J.D. Barker and James Patterson, God love them, they need to read. They will never capture the same. They try to do a horror book, but they will never capture the horror that Carmen does in this book. So.
Mm-hmm. So I read the synopsis that you had, Angelique, that was less descriptive. If I had read the synopsis in my own book, I would have had a better understanding of what I was getting into going in. Because I thought, so when they were saying, like, this is being presented with horror themes, I thought she was going to be a little bit more more of a narrative. Yeah. More narrative with it, and less like, it's almost like journal entries, and it splices through time, and there's a lot of history in there that I wasn't expecting, which had I read my own description, I would have known was coming. She then said it at the end, like, there is no real definitive book about abuse between women in a relationship. And like, this isn't this book isn't that. This isn't the first one, but let it be like a loose guideline for future ones. And she even gave her resources, which I really appreciate.
Her did y'all read the footnotes?
Mm-hmm.
I did, yeah.
They were fantastic.
They were
fantastic because most footnotes are just, and a lot of hers were just, I'm just citing this source, which is great. But she went into some really interesting detail with the footnotes that did give you that historical perspective of how basically she led up to this story needs to be told. And so this is one of those, if you do read it, don't skip the footnotes just because it makes the page shorter.
That's a great recommendation.
Read the footnotes because there's some really interesting, especially as a history major, there's some really interesting stuff in those sources.
So I guess what I was really trying to say was I was expecting it to be narrative. I thought it was going to be more of like her personal experience, as opposed, this was a little bit more clinical, more removed. She had footnotes to her own journal entries or whatever. And so it was a little more clinical, and I think that's actually the way the book needs to be, because then it doesn't suck us into experiencing and reliving her trauma, which no one needs, including her.
Yeah.
And instead is like eye-opening. This is spreading awareness, and this book spreads awareness without spreading that more traumatizing events.
What's the term? And it sounds bad, but it's called tragedy porn.
Yeah.
Where trauma porn is what I wrote down in my notes.
But they really double down on someone's. I feel like a lot of like YA books do that.
Yeah, they
it's
can.
like, let's find everything that we can throw at this one person that would cause them to be, they're this and they're that and they're everything, and it's almost, it just gets to the point where it's like I can't get through this, and this one I could get through, because you're right, it doesn't do that, and thank God, because
I know.
I mean, if she wanted to tell her story fully and she wanted to do it, she has every right to, because
That's
we
her
know
story.
it's her story. But I do think that she understands that, she's talked about at the end of the book that she still has those moments, where she thinks about it. So it's still traumatizing to her. So why bring that up? And instead, let's find a way to make this something that can be a tool for people moving forward so that they can do better than I did.
Yes, I agree. So Andrew, what I thought about was there is a director in theater. His name was Bertolt Brecht, and his whole thing. I'm gonna misquote this, misrepresent it, whatever. Come for me, theater people. It's fine. But his whole thing was he did not think that theater should be a cathartic experience. He didn't want you to come in and feel what the actors were feeling, because once you go in, you feel it, you complete that emotion, and you go home. He wanted theater to stay with you and teach you something. Like, you need to leave with something to think about. So that's where you get a lot of the removal of realistic sets, and you get lights that you can see, and that kind of black box theater vibe where you're not sucked into the world, because he wants you to pay attention to what's happening. And that's what I kept thinking, is she wants us to see what this is like.
And I still think that there's probably, she didn't mention, I still think there's some catharsis for her
I
in
hope
doing
so.
it, but doing it in a healthy way.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just, I'm just going to put all my anger out on the page. Again, if she wants to, she deserves to, because geez.
Yeah.
But, finding a way to make it cathartic as well as, a lesson. And I think I like that approach. I think that's why it was so well reviewed and so, hailed as different, because it does have the audacity to say, let's figure out a way to understand the history of where we come from and how to move forward with it. And I even like the ending. She's like, there's never really an ending. I'm choosing to end it here. So we know that she still thinks about this. We know that there may be more stories to come. The more she, because a lot of this, I'm sure there's stuff that's blacked out of her mind. Some of the worst. Sometimes that happens where people can't remember stuff because their mind has literally pulled it into that.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see where I don't know if she's written anything since then. Do we know? Does she? I don't think so.
I'm not sure. I think this came out in 2019.
Yeah, so it's not been too long.
And I have a feeling throughout the book it took her a while to write it.
Yeah.
So she might just be in the process of writing something.
But it'd be interesting. She says, "This is where I choose to end it."
Good for you.
Yeah, I like that. There's a strength in that. That is I've said my piece, and now I'm done. And I like that. But you never know. You never know what stories are going to come next. She's her writing style, her ability to put stuff together. She is an incredible writer. I'd love to see I think she's done maybe some fiction. I'd love to read a fiction book of hers, because I think that'd be interesting. What do you think, Angelique?
I like her writing. That's part of the reason I rated it 4.5, because I like her writing. I think she did well, and I think she used the tropes that she was pointing out very well. And I think she brought it all together at the end. So
and her knowledge,
yeah.
I know she did research. I know she didn't just know all these things, but her ability to jump from Gaslight, the 40s film, which is brilliant, by the way, if you've never seen it, to Greek mythology, to her
I had
ability.
to look up the Bluebeard story. Did you guys know that?
I think I was vaguely familiar with it. I didn't look it up. I should have, because I wanted to.
That's a horrific story.
It is. But her ability to blend all that together with the pop culture and the historical references, that, you're right, that in the middle of this horror, that kept me in it as someone who is a pop culture enthusiast, who has a degree in history, who loves it, who grew up with it, learning it. And so her ability to do that, I would not say it took you away from the horrificness. Is that a word? Horrificness? I'm going to pretend like it is.
Yeah.
Okay. We voted it in. I liked it. But it did give you, I don't know, it made it, I think it made it more lyrical. It made it more, the flow made it work better, because it was giving you all these metaphors. And maybe some people might say it's too many metaphors, but I don't think it was. I think that she had one metaphor and she pulled, I don't know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I've lost my train of thought. But anyway,
Someone's going to need
references.
Oh, good. I like the references too. Yeah. I think it added layer and depth to her as a person. It's sometimes really easy to cast people as two-dimensional. She's an abuser, she's an abused person. You create these stereotypes in your mind. And she's like, no, I'm actually a full-fledged human being. And here, it adds substance and texture, which is really nice. But y'all are going to have to explain some of the metaphors to me.
Okay.
throughout the dream house, like she was talking about the dream house, the place, but then the dream house also not as a place, which I get because that's where memories.
Yeah.
Was talking about where memories were hidden and
Yeah.
you don't talk about. But then I would struggle, like, okay, I don't understand how the dream house is a metaphor for
Bildungsroman.
There we go. Like, I understood the chapter, but I
Yeah.
don't understand that metaphor. Like, I feel like that's something that's just above my head.
I'm trying to.
Well, I mean, Bildungsroman is a coming of age story, and usually come of age in one place, right? Like in a dream house.
Is it a coming of age? I thought when I looked it up, it was like
It's usually a coming of age.
Like
It's
a-
sorta-
We're gonna Google it real quick because I looked
All
it up
right.
and it was like religious.
You know, she does the idea of the house being multiple things. I remember when I was in college, I took an English class, and it was just called Great American Authors, but the teacher,
Yeah.
the professor could do whatever they wanted to with it, and it was a slave literature course. One of the ones we read was Uncle Tom's Cabin, which is very problematic, obviously,
Yeah.
and we look back at now. But that was one of the things that this professor who I love, her name's May Henderson. I don't know if she's still teaching in Carolina, but it was about how each of the houses represented like changes in the chat, like the descriptions of the house actually lent itself into the mood of what was going on or the characters that it
Yeah.
represented. So I do kind of get the idea of the houses. So basically, I think she's just something about that house connects it to everything. So that was where she came of age in the sense of she discovered who she was. She was the
okay.
first time that she maybe felt like this was it, this was the future, only to realize, of course, that it wasn't. I don't know. I just think that the house just
And
serves
became
it.
more of a prison. Okay.
Yeah.
Nope, I see it, and that adds a beautiful layer that I didn't get before.
Yeah.
And you were correct, Angelique. It's a novel dealing with one person's formative years of spiritual education. And she did go back and talk about her religious growth, too.
Yeah.
Anyway, I feel like, were you finished answering the question about... I feel like you
Yes.
got interrupted.
I feel like I got sidetracked. So let's just move on to the questions I do have.
Yeah.
I told Andrew that it was kind of difficult to come up with questions for this book
Mhm.
because of the nature of the book itself, because it's a memoir, and you don't want to be like, can you relate to this, especially this? Because you don't
Yeah.
want to talk about that in a podcast for a library.
It's hard to make jokes about something
Yeah.
so serious.
Yeah, I know.
Not our place.
No. All right, so the first one I came up with was, or I found it somewhere. Why do you think the author chose to write this memoir? Why do you think she chose to write? I think we kind of covered it, but who wants to go first?
Well, I think we did. We talked about how she wanted this to not just be a memoir of abuse, but
Yeah.
a way to frame it in history, and as well as a way to give maybe someone who's going through it the keys,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
you know, and make people understand why these things happen, why these things are ignored. You know, she talks about the historical
big one.
context of being
Yeah.
ignored. But I think that if you're going through it, understanding that you're not alone, understanding that there's a history of this, it's a recent history in terms of actually dealing with it.
Yeah.
But to make it more of something that a toolbox, if you will, for people moving forward of how to, not necessarily how to deal with it, but how to understand it, I think.
I think. Yes, I agree. No, I'm trying to acknowledge what you said, and I
No,
agree with that
no.
100%. And I also think that it is about showing that. I lost my train of thought. Oh my gosh, no, it's coming back. It's coming back. It is also about how universal being in a high control relationship is. That it can happen between two women. And it isn't just like, you don't have to ascribe one of them being male and one of them being female, and therefore one of them not having as much credence.
Yeah.
Like, you're allowed to treat these as two people, and they're in a relationship, and there are wonderful things about the relationship that absolutely make sense as to why someone would stay, because you're sucked in and in love, and you get love bombed, and that's the high control person creates this world that only that high control person can build for you, or makes the abused individual feel. Like, that can happen with anyone in between any other people and
any
to the
romantic or
really
sexual
bad.
relationship. There's
Any
it's-
relationship in general. It's like
Period, yeah.
familial, friends.
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. People are
I think
people.
you're right. The universality of it is
Yeah.
really because it could totally be seen as like a niche. This is about this community, and it's about these types of people. No, she really connects it to a greater conversation about abuse in relationships and
Mhm.
makes you understand that's why this is important. You have to understand it outside of, because she talks about all those cases of prosecutors didn't know how to prosecute,
Mhm.
juries didn't know how to understand
Yeah.
things because they didn't understand it from the perspective of a queer couple. And it's like, so she's like, forget all of that. It doesn't, not really. I mean, she understands the history of that, but her basic point is it's abuse no matter what.
Yeah.
Why does it have to, why do we have to create its own thing of, oh, it's this type of abuse? No, it's the same type of abuse that any of these other women or men have suffered over the years from, like you said, any relationship.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a really important point that people miss. It shouldn't matter.
Yeah, don't ignore it.
Yeah.
Right.
And thank you for saying what I was trying to say much better.
Oh, I didn't
appreciate
mean
it.
to. I'm sorry. I
No,
didn't mean to
I'm
steal your
really glad
thunder.
because I was like struggling. I was struggling, and I appreciate you stepping in there. Thank you. Don't make that face. I really meant it. Like,
Oh,
it's
okay.
a genuine
no,
thank
I
you.
know. But I also didn't want to be like, bulldoze. I did not want to be, the controller in
No.
the thing.
I needed it. I was struggling. I couldn't get my words out. Anyway.
So I think that's like the broader reason why she wrote it. But I think maybe for like a more personal reason, because she talks about controlling the story or like who controls the story, which she talks about archives in the prologue. And I think she wanted to get out her story because she said she still has friends or people she knows who know both of them that don't really believe or don't really recognize that her relationship was abusive.
Oh, yeah, because she had no bruises.
Yeah, she had no proof.
Like, psychological abuse
Yeah,
is still real
yeah.
abuse.
That is towards the end, that chapter hit me where she was like, I wish she had just hit me. I wish I had bruises.
Yeah.
She's like, and she knows that sounds crazy because people who are getting physically abused are like, please, I would give anything in the world to stop getting physically abused. But then it's like, but she's like, but then maybe people would believe me because when you have the physical scars, then it's like, oh, now I know, and people don't believe you unless they can see it.
Yeah.
That was like, oh.
Mhm.
So I think this is like an effort from her to like put her evidence out there that she has, even if it's not something you can touch or see, like that. Like, this is what happened to me. This is my story.
Right.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
All right. Next question. Why do you think Machado chose to write mostly in second person?
Which normally I hate.
Yeah.
Same.
Yeah.
I
It took me
didn't-
a while to notice it was second person, honestly.
It was so metaphorical and it was so universal that I think that's why she chose it. She didn't want it to be me.
Mhm.
She didn't want it to seem like it was a third person thing. And second person you is kind of universal.
Yeah.
It could be her, it could be anyone that she's talking to.
Yeah.
So normally I hate it because it's just annoying. I mean the style is just, I'm like, stop. But in this case, because she made it so, I don't know.
She made it so clear that this is something that happens to everyone. It could happen to you.
To
so she
you,
used
yeah.
to you.
And if this is
Yeah.
happening to you, then this story, I understand that. But
Yeah.
I don't want to make it about, I think she just didn't want to make it about her.
Yeah.
But she also didn't want third person is so distant. And so
Yeah.
this was that happy medium and it worked. This is the first probably second person thing that I've read that I didn't really struggle through in terms of its writing style.
Well, if you even go back to the dedication, it says, if you're reading this book, it is for you.
Yeah.
And I think that goes back to the idea that a lot of people don't think this won't happen, or a lot of people think this won't happen. This couldn't happen to me. I would see it coming a mile away. I'm way too smart for this. I know what abuse looks like. And until it's happened to you, you really don't.
No.
You really don't.
Mm-mm. Very true. It helps her message of universality. It really does.
Yeah.
That was very insightful, Angelique.
Thank
No.
you. Thanks. I was
You're
an
all
English
worried
major.
about
I was reading this book. I'm like, oh, maybe I was an English major. I didn't just like coast my way through.
Like this one over here.
You were just talking about some obscure theater dude who's probably not obscure to theater people. So
And it also might be wrong.
made sense though.
Well, we'll Google him later. They're told to correct.
Sometimes if you're using a metaphor, it's for you, whether it's right or not. We're just going to take her words and say whether it was the right metaphor or not, it worked. And so
there we go.
It's also your interpretation of him.
There we
And
go.
theaters-
Thank you, Andrew. The dream house is a theater experience.
I don't want to see it.
I don't either.
Oh God.
Mm-mm.
No offense, Carmen. We again. It's not because we don't really respect what you did.
Thank
but
you for sharing.
Thank you
Yeah.
for sharing. And again, I would encourage. There are movies and there are books like that. There are plays like that. You have to see it. You have to read it, even if it's hard.
Yeah.
You can't stop talking about it.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean you have to keep revisiting it.
You usually ask a question, who do you recommend this book for? And
Yeah.
that's tricky because if you're
Yeah.
looking for a fun, easy read, this is not your book.
No.
But you know who should read it? Every student in high school.
Yes.
Yes.
Every
Yes.
student. This needs to be high school literature.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. At least college. Should be like.
I hear that, but I think high
No.
school,
This
because
started
But
in
I think.
this
don't know if
started
it-
in college,
Yeah.
so there's some graphic moments.
Yes.
But you know what? I am of the personal opinion, and you don't have to share it, that graphic moments happen to high school kids.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they do.
And the idea that you're going to just not talk about it, I think it reinforces the idea that the high school kids aren't experiencing it or should be experiencing it. They don't have the full frontal cortex to understand what's happening to them.
That's true.
You need an adult to come in and have that conversation. So,
It's like what's that TV show Euphoria, which
Mhm.
I think does
ooh,
verge very much into trauma porn, way too much. But I think there's a reason why it is so stinking popular, and it's because while it does go overboard most of the
Mhm.
time, while it does verge way, especially with Rue's character, so much into tragedy or trauma porn. I think though the reason people are into it is because there are people who see themselves, at least maybe not to the dramatic extremes of it,
Mhm.
but it's like, yeah, I did drugs in high school.
yeah.
Yeah, I had these issues in high school. Yeah, I did, and so you're right. It is a story. Maybe it's a story that needs to be told, whether people want to hear it or not.
Yeah. And if you can read Chaucer's The Woman in Bath,
Oh yeah, yeah.
you can read this.
True.
Like I think it should be read in high school. But yeah, and studied in college.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But let's say none of us are in college. We're all in our 30s.
Yeah.
I would recommend this for anybody who. It's funny. I went last week to see Beth Macy at Gaston College. She was talking about her new book, Raising Lazarus. She wrote the book Dope Sick, which became
Yes.
which is a brilliant series. We talked about in our Emmys podcast. Michael Keaton did win. It won, I think, for cinematography. So it's an Emmy award-winning series. I would totally recommend it on Hulu. If we could ever get it here, I would order copies because it's so important. Raising Lazarus talks about, it's kind of like, how do we get to a solution? And actually, our own people in Gaston County are mentioned in the book, which is why she came here. Yeah, the Olive Branch
Ministry.
Yeah, Michelle and her team are mentioned.
Side note, that staff development day that we had, that
She's not
Olive
amazing.
Branch, that completely changed my entire perspective and understanding of addiction. And I know
Right.
it's rampant in our county.
It is.
So I really appreciate that. Thank you.
But I like how she approaches it of, yeah, you don't want to hear it.
Mhm.
Yeah, you don't want to hear about harm reduction. Michelle and her team started doing harm reduction when it was illegal to do so.
Oh, wow.
They were slipping clean needles into lunches and stuff because they understood the point of it. And people go, oh, you're just giving drug dealers. Yeah, that's the stigma of it. And that's what she talks about. She says, you can be sitting in a room and you have the hippy dippies and the people in the Trump hats. It doesn't matter who you are or where you come from or your political persuasion. We are all getting addicted. And we all need to be a part of the solution. They talk about the religious aspect of it. They think bringing pastors in. I was sitting down the row from a pastor at a local church who is, he's very vocal and he's a really great guy. And he, when she starts telling these stories of like, oh, she's been 5 months sober, you hear him saying, praise Christ, because he's understanding the importance of it and getting law enforcement, getting Chief Ramey to sit up there and talk about it. But Beth talks about it in a way that I think Carmen talks about it is we all need to understand why this is important.
Yeah.
Because it is affecting us. She said, 1 in 3 people are directly affected by it. Like they have a family member or a friend who's an addiction. But I would argue everyone somehow is affected by it.
Yeah.
We talk
Yeah.
about, the Austin Chaudhry and his parents, they do the remembering Austin on the thing, and they are
Yes.
huge a part of this. Mom taught him at South Point, absolutely adored him, wrote his letter for Carolina. And so even if it's one of those
Oh.
things where it's like, okay, I didn't know Austin personally, but you are connected somehow to everyone. We all need to remember Austin because we all have an Austin in our lives. We probably all have a Carmen in our lives too.
Dude, so, oh my God, yes, to just everything you just said. But also, this is coming from people who hate message books.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I agree with you. I just assumed you agreed. I'm sorry, Angelique.
No.
Sorry. But I will speak for me as someone who kind of gags at don't tell me like what to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of like in Lost, the John Locke, don't tell me what I can't do.
Yes,
like,
exactly.
But no, this book needs to be read. This message needs to get out.
Because of its universality.
Mm-hmm.
Because of what it represents. So yeah, it was just interesting. We literally I had Beth Macy last week in this, and that brutal honesty. She's saying 4-letter words and gas and and you could tell some people are, but she's like, we have to get over that stigma. We have to figure out what we can do to learn our lesson and to move forward from it. And that's exactly, I think, what Carmen's. I don't think she's preaching. That's why I like that. I don't think Beth Macy. I mean, Beth Macy is very. I would argue that she is preaching, but the way that she does it is by simply telling these stories.
Vocal and preaching are different.
Very different, yeah. And it's she's not. She said, "I'm telling you these stories, kind of like Carmen's telling you these stories, not to tell you what to believe, but to help you understand what's happening."
Mm-hmm.
And her story, and then when you get to them, you're like gut punched. Because the stories are real. These are things that are happening. There are people being abused every day. There are people living on the side of the road who are so addicted that they've lost their kids and their house. And we have to tell these stories because if we tell the stories, there's a better chance that we're all going to get together and say, we need these stories to end.
Ooh. And all the shades in between too.
Mm-hmm. It's so it's just, yeah, you're right. I hate message books.
Yeah.
Because I feel like, okay, I'm college educated. I'm smart enough to figure out what I believe on my own. I don't need someone to tell me. But she did it in a really, really good way. And I would even argue maybe it's not a message book. I think it's just a personal story.
Yeah.
And a personal and a historical narrative of how her story fits into it. And lets you decide.
You're
Was that
giving me
good?
chills,
I know, and I told
Andrew.
Angelique I don't ever plan things. This just comes out of my head. And then today they'll be like, what's your name? I'm like, oh, I don't know. Like it'll be gone. This is gold gem, and then it'll be the rest of the day. I'll just be mush. So,
well,
it comes and goes.
Thanks for bringing it to the podcast.
I'm sure your staff
Sorry,
will appreciate you not bringing it to.
Sorry, that sounded like I was tooting my horn. I'm just saying, it's sometimes I'm like, oh, that did come out, and then later I'm like, they're like, what day is it? And I'm like, I don't, November? Is it November yet? Because I don't know.
November day.
Yes. So, yeah, it's so fleeting when it happens.
No, I'm impressed. I know you're smart. But
we are all very smart.
Angelique's the smartest.
Yes, she is. Mm-hmm. We found that out when we took our MAT.
We took a test, and it has been proven. She's been tested.
She's in the gifted program. What is that from?
Oh, well, she's been tested. I was making a joke about Big Bang Theory, but now that I have explained it, I don't know if it's funny. What is
Mine's from something different. I don't remember, but
Y'all watch too much TV.
We really do. Why do you think you're smarter than we are?
Yeah, our brains
I watch
are mush.
car crash videos on YouTube. Is that how you balance out your life?
Gosh. We're watching old reruns of sitcoms. I spent my Saturday watching Vicki Lawrence do Mama's Family from like 1986.
I love Mama's
Oh, by the way,
Family.
it was great, but I'm like, I need that nostalgia, and you're over here like, dark and brooding and studying the analytics of it's just crazy.
Murderbot. What's the next question?
All right, let's
No
see.
response.
Murderbot
is a response.
You're looking at me and I
Her
don't like
visor is
Your visor's up. She's
needs to
watching
be.
that show. Yeah.
Let's see. Which one do I want to do? What did you think of the perspective she shared on the etymology of the word archive being house of the ruler in the prologue?
Genius.
Yeah.
Because they're the person who controls the narrative.
Yeah.
So
History is told by the victors.
Exactly.
And that is the
Aw.
truth. It is told by those who have won.
It makes it sound like the people who weren't the quote unquote victors, their story doesn't have value.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And for a long time, it hasn't. And it's still, in many cases, people don't want to hear those stories. So this woman, in many ways, had victory over her, and it's some sick, twisted, controlling thing. And so, yeah, and that's why her friends don't believe it because she's the dominant. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I just got excited because she got excited.
I had a thought.
Oh, no, you think it because you think it. I'll trail off forever.
Okay.
You think your thought out loud.
So she's obviously the survivor, the victim of the abuse. So she's like not the house of the ruler, but at the same time, I think that this book is her victory.
Well, that
Like,
makes me want to
I
cry.
like it. I know. Reclaiming the narrative.
Yeah, she got out, and this is her narrative. This is her victory.
Yeah,
So
I like it.
she's the ruler of the story now.
She says like 5 words when I say 500, and it sounds so much better. I should learn. This is why when we wrote papers in grad school, she would take like a 26-page paper, make it 5 pages, and actually sound good.
At least you say 500 words that make sense. I say 500 words that are like babble, like baby babble.
But you're right. I think that this is another reason to read this is she's from 2 marginalized communities,
Mm-hmm.
and 2 marginalized communities 3. That's correct. Women.
We could probably keep adding those
I'm sure,
intersectionalities.
yeah.
But yeah.
So it's you're right. 3. Excuse me. 100% right. And so being able to tell that story is and it's again by making it a part of a history, she's reclaiming the entire narrative from a community that has been ignored in this circumstance.
Yeah.
So it's a double, triple, quadruple whammy of breaking that stereotype of archive as the ruler.
Yeah.
So.
And also kind of hits you as a librarian about the House of the Ruler thing.
Dang it, Angelique. Go ahead, keep going.
No, that's all I have to say about that. That it does kind of hit you as a librarian. Now, what were you going to say?
What?
Sometimes I wonder and I feel guilty, and not guilty, but like as the librarians, like we help. This is a weird thing to say because we're all about free access to everything. Like
Yeah.
I am never going to deny you something you want.
Yeah.
Unless people above me tell me I can't. But I'm going to work.
Right.
Even if that's the case, I'll give you an Amazon link.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to deny you the information.
Yeah.
But we help shape the narrative of what people are exposed to.
Yeah.
Hashtag ban books week.
Yeah. I mean, if we don't order these books, which we did, we had it before we ordered extra copies, so we had to read it. But we had this book since it was released. If we don't order those books, if we don't put them on our shelves, if we don't display them, if we don't do any of those things, then the narrative will be whatever the dominant narrative is.
Yeah.
And we have to be now. We still have to have that dominant narrative in our collection because we do have to represent all sides.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But I think it's important to make sure that this perspective is also a part of that story.
It's strange to be the person who is the archivist and also the person who's trying to represent the other stories. That is a weird dichotomy that
It
librarians have to play.
When people ask, like you have to be offended by something in the library.
Yeah.
And they're like, does that mean you order books that you don't agree with?
All
Yeah,
the time.
every
the time.
day. But that's okay. I don't have to agree with them. That story needs to be told just as much as whatever my story is.
Mm-hmm.
I think that what the deal that she's making here is that this story wasn't told, or it was told in bits and pieces, and it was told with kind of BS, background to it. This was a story that needed to be told. So it's just as important as the traditional a man beats his wife.
Yeah.
That story needs to be told too. We need to talk about that story.
Mm-hmm.
But this is an interesting twist on it that she makes very clear. You don't know about this
Yeah.
because we've hidden or we've written off that history, or we've what's the term? Rationalized that history. I think is the term that I'm looking for.
I'm now thinking, because you said about breaking down the stories, made me think about how when she was in school and she was writing, and the critique she got was that her stories were all broken down.
Mm-hmm.
And the quote she said is, "I broke the stories down because I was breaking down and I didn't know what else to do." And so I think also, to go back to your previous question, in this moment I'm realizing breaking down the stories, yes, it was about owning her own narrative, but I think it's also about helping her cope, because now she can put all of those bits and pieces together and rebuild herself.
Mm-hmm. And so spoiler, we said spoilers. How cool is it that she marries the woman who was the other end of that relationship when they first started. And knowing that they found each other in that, part of that story is, I think one of the reasons she was able to heal because she wasn't alone. Because obviously,
someone heard her.
what's
They
her wife's
listened.
name?
Val.
Val, thank
Val.
you. Yes, but Val knew too. Val knew.
Yeah.
Val probably went through it. They didn't really dive into that, but I'm sure Val went through it.
Oh,
There
of
was a
course
mentioning
they
of it.
did,
Yeah.
because at the end,
That's
when Carmen was like, "I can't believe that that you guys were in an open relationship before, and that you would even accept me in," and she was like, "I had no choice." / what?
Yeah.
The Val was never in an open relationship
Yeah.
with the girlfriend, the she
Right.
character, who could also be anyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was that, but I love that that's how that story didn't end. Remember, the story doesn't end. She chose to end it, but it's never really over. But I love that is the end result of that, because I think it helps with the catharsis, and it also helps with the idea of you are not alone. I found the person who understood what I was going through.
Someone else can live your story too.
Right. Because I had those friends who wouldn't believe me, maybe still don't believe her. Even after this story, I'm sure there are some who say, you're just being dramatic or whatever it is. So how do you get out of that? You get out of that by finding the person who understands you best.
Yeah.
And what a cool story for them to end on. This horror. Not that it ever ends. But if
To
you're
move
gonna
on.
to move on, yeah.
Next step, go through whatever it is they
Yeah.
did.
All right. Are there any moments or quotes that kind of stood out to you?
So I know I just read that quote,
Mm-hmm.
and that was the only one I wrote down, but
Mhm.
she used a lot of imagery of her watching, and it gave me the feeling that she often felt removed from herself during this process. I don't remember if she ever said that, but it gave me the feeling. Like after one of the incidents when they were doing a cross-country drive, which, okay, side note, what kind of car does she drive that hasn't broken down a million times but does that many cross-country trips? Because she goes to Chicago and Florida,
Also,
New
I hate
York.
driving. Book a plane. Why are you constantly driving with this
She
woman?
listens to audiobooks. Come on.
You can listen to audiobooks on a plane.
Okay, but anyway.
Just saying.
Anyway, the imagery. So it was after the girlfriend took the keys and drove, and the Carmen was so scared during the whole drive home.
Yeah.
And she got home and she sat down in her yard. She didn't go inside at 4 a.m. even though she was exhausted and terrified. She sat and then she watched coyotes in her front yard. That imagery stuck with me. And then later her watching the fire, it's like she was watching the forestry of her life at the time that she was going through it, and then watching the fire purify it and burn it all down.
Yeah.
That's what I got.
You talk about the driving, and we make the joke of why don't you fly, but in a lot of cases, driving is seen as cathartic. A lot of people love to drive and listen to music or something to it is like a catharsis for some people.
Do you know why? Your brain actually transitions into a different focus when you drive.
Oh.
And it allows people to engage different parts of their brain.
Oh, see? You learn something new every day. I remember that movie Gravity where
Oh,
and I love that movie. What I hate about that
intense.
whole story is that people are like, "Oh, there was no story, I didn't care about the character." I'm like, "How could you not?" They give you little bits and pieces, but the bit piece was after the daughter died, she wouldn't go home. She would just drive and drive and drive. So maybe one of the reasons that she focuses so much on, maybe it was a different car. She didn't mention that. Maybe she got a new car at some point. But she mentions that because that should be this catharsis. We're going on this great trip, and it became yet another, not a dream house, but the dream car. It became that another prison that her girlfriend was able to trap her in. I know. I am just. Let me tell you something. I don't know what's going on. It's that Bang energy drink I had. Bang. That stuff is terrible for you. Do not drink that. I am not endorsing.
It is really bad for you.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, I worry for your health.
I'll
Love
be
you.
fine.
Okay.
Wait, why is it really bad for you?
The energy drinks.
Yeah. There's no sugar.
They do some. It's not just the sugar. That does something to your blood, I guess, because it's dehydrating.
Yeah.
And if you drink too many in a day, it can give you heart issues.
Oh,
because
I'm fat, so I already have heart issues.
Well,
fine.
I don't need you to make them worse.
I don't do it every day. Jeez.
Okay, fine.
Mom.
I was just thinking you were gonna call me mom, and then you did.
Oh, okay. So I liked the one I'm stealing Kindle's
That's
book.
fine.
But one of the funny parts, because it's not really funny, but there
Yeah.
are some interesting ones. I loved. Okay, now I'm just making noise. I forgot how many pages there were. I like the first one, which is she says, "I never read prologues. I find them tedious. If what the author has to say is so important, why relegate it to the paratext? What are you trying to hide?" And I don't know why. That was the first thing that you read, and I was like, "Oh, that's clever." And you're like, "I hate prologues. I don't ever read prologues. I should.
I also don't like
I
prologues.
don't like prologues." And then she goes into Dream House as a prologue, but it's in an ironic way. And I was like, that was one of those where it's like, from that moment, I'm like, I'm gonna like this book. Not in terms of the subject matter, but I'm going to like the writing style of this book because she also has her own, I say sense of humor, but not in the way of, obviously this isn't funny, but she has her own, she understands her own tropes.
Yeah.
And she's willing to play on those, which of course then she does over and over and over and over again.
I think it's okay that there's funny in there because two opposite things can exist at the same time.
Very true.
The girlfriend can be a lovely human with other people and also be terrorizing Carmen at home.
Right.
Yeah.
Both of those things can be true.
Yes.
Carmen also, though, does, another thing that struck me was she does give at least enough background where she talks about how the dream house woman would literally black out and wouldn't remember. She talks about that. There was a scene where she's with her family and Carmen's not there, and you hear the father screaming and abusing her.
I know.
And so you realize it doesn't excuse what the woman did, but it also explains why maybe it's generational trauma. She doesn't understand a healthy relationship because her father was abusive to her mother.
Mm-hmm.
She has such psychological issues herself. She can't even remember when she's done these horrible things.
She probably doesn't recognize them as horrible.
Right. As much as Carmen has blacked out things, which is why her story's in bits and pieces, the girlfriend was blacking out things at the same time. It's just, I'm not saying she excuses it. She obviously doesn't. But it is interesting how she brings that in. Basically, it makes this character, she's not just a pure villain. You hate just pure villains with no explanation. You know, like I hate pure villains with no explanation.
Mm-hmm. Like in the last
She gives
book?
this, yes.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, James Patterson, J.D. Barker need to read this. This is how you write a horror. But she gives her a background just enough that you realize you don't feel sorry for her, but you understand her.
So
And that struck me as if you're going to use this as your cathartic novel against this horrible person, but you're still making them human.
yeah. So that brings me to one of the quotes that struck me. It's on page 94 of our book. A reminder, perhaps, that abusers do not need to be and rarely are cackling maniacs. They just need to want something and not care how they get it.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Boom.
Boom.
Boom. That goes into like the high control relationship stuff that I was learning about.
Yeah.
Boom.
Mm-hmm. That's what I also like too. I mean, most of her chapters are short. You read these 400-page novels that some of them are great, and you need all 400 pages, but some of them are like, she can do it in like a paragraph.
Yeah.
Make you have that same like gut punch that some people take 400 pages and never get to.
Yeah. So this was not a long book, but I read it every single night for like 10 nights. I could only do a little bit at a time.
Mm-hmm.
So as much as she could only remember a little bit at a time, I could only handle a little bit at a time. Like, I had to take time to digest it. And
I think she respects her reader in that sense that she understands that this is difficult. So, by bringing in those references that you're going to understand, oh, I've seen that movie, you know, or I've read that book, but also by breaking it up.
Oh, the reference about Disney villains as queer. I never thought about Disney villains representing the queer community in a negative light. And I blew my mind, and I'm sorry. Like that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Disney is a I tell people this. I took a class in college called The History of Latinos in the United States, and I love this professor. He basically was like, you can do a term paper on anything as long as it fits in with the history of Latinos in the United States. Mm-hmm. So he did the same. I took a class with him that was a history of the American worker, and I did the Loray Mill Strike as my term paper, which, of course, was very relevant here in Gaston County. But for that one, I did the history of Latinos in American film. And big companies like Disney, film is very much a reflection of the culture. So it sucks because you go back and you watch your childhood favorites and you're like, oh, dang, that was awful. Now that you know you know those stereotypes, but you also recognize that probably at that time they could get away with that. That was an appeal to an audience, whether they knew it. I mean, subversive. because it was a reflection of what was going on when Ursula in 1986 during the AIDS crisis. Maybe that was what.
I know, you're just chipping away at all. I'm going through it with Harry Potter and Disney villains now. Like,
it's okay. How about
it
this?
needs to happen. It needs to happen.
It needs to happen. It doesn't mean that you don't. It's okay that you liked it as a kid.
Both of the things opposite things can be true at the
Same time, yes. But yeah, Disney's a reflection of that culture, and sometimes it's hard to realize that. Like in the 1940s, there was this thing called the Three Caballeros, and it was Brazil and Mexico, and everyone was happy because they were allies, and they were providing troops, and they were providing weapons, and they were in support of World War II. Then by the 1950s, when you had the Red Scare, and a lot of Latinx individuals were being targeted because a lot of them were in labor movements, which were seen as communists, and a lot of them were communists, all of a sudden they're swarthy again. And so you literally, it reflects each culture. And so then you go back and you watch Three Caballeros, and then you watch something for the 50s, and you may not notice the change, but when you realize what the change is, you're like, oh, that's horrible. So I think that's the same thing. I'm sorry, I went off on something, didn't I? Y'all both look at me like, shut up.
No.
Andrew.
So my thought is, I'm really glad I'm having this conversation with an English major and a history major. I have no place other than to listen. Go, Angelique, go.
Oh, okay. So about the queer villains thing.
Yeah.
So she talks about representation a lot, and like how I think a part of something that stuck with me is like the thing about her relationship being poor representation is like really heartbreaking. And it's like maybe was part of the reason she stayed so quiet so long, and 'cause she didn't want to reveal that her seemingly ideal queer life was problematic, that she failed at that representation. So maybe she feels like that queer villain in media, that she was just trying to survive.
Mhm.
So that, and now she has to like reveal that her relationship was not the utopia that a lot of the community wants it to be.
Yeah, because she also talks about how the community wasn't accepting of these things. I mean, the
Yeah.
community itself.
Like
because,
that trial one where one of the women who was abused was
Yeah.
in a lesbian relationship, but she wasn't. Not a lot of focus was put on her. And at one point, one of the jury members, who was also a lesbian, like voted her as I don't forget what the trial was about, like guilty, because she didn't want to believe that her relationship was that bad.
Murder.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it was
Yeah,
the
yeah,
one
yeah,
for
murder.
Yeah. It
Because-
was probably self-defense
Yeah.
from abuse.
Yeah. Carmen's next thought about that was like the lesbian on
The
the
jury.
jury was trying to protect the lesbian
Yeah, image.
image,
Yeah.
but it's like, well, a lesbian died.
Yeah.
And and I hate it for when that happens for marginalized communities. One of the ones that I think was such a gut punch for a lot of African Americans was Bill Cosby, because he was put on the pedestal as this is the ideal of what we all strive for, and he was someone that crossed the barrier. People across America loved Bill Cosby. And there's this really great series that came out by W. Kamau Bell called We Need to Talk About Cosby. And a lot of it is African Americans in the entertainment industry sitting down and having that difficult conversation of, we didn't want to believe it, because then you're right, because of that, for the exact same reason that woman didn't want to believe, because it wasn't the idealism that we had portrayed it to be.
Yeah.
But we had to talk about Cosby.
Well,
Carmen needs to talk about this.
in marginalized communities, opposites are not allowed to be true at the same time.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's just interesting that we read this, but those conversations are going on in the community. In those, Michael Jackson's another great example of that. There's still people who don't want to believe that something was wrong because he was the superstar. He was, one of the first black artists to break all these records and do all these things, and so we don't want to. They're afraid that the one bad thing will hurt the image of the entire community.
Yeah.
That's a shame.
And unfortunately, if you read comment sections,
Yeah.
it's true. There's a reason they fear that. So, that's sucks. I mean, how do you end with that other than there's a reason why she tells that story, because she understands, she wants to talk about that stigma within that community because she sees it.
Yeah.
And she sees how it affects people's view of how things happen. So again, another brilliant move in her part as part of that education process to break that stigma of why marginalized communities often do protect things that they shouldn't protect.
Yeah, this conversation is making me make it a 4.5 book. Thank you.
Okay, we're all 4.5. I'm with you.
Yeah, like it's a good book.
It's a really
It
solid
is.
book.
It's good.
It's a good book.
All right. So what did you think of her use of footnotes?
Well, Andrew kind of said earlier that he liked it, and you know what? I did too.
Me too.
Providing that historical context, because
Yeah.
this is nonfiction.
Yeah.
People forget that because she makes it so lyrical and dreamy and all these references to fictional things. It is nonfiction, and good for her for citing even stories like you said. She's telling her own story, but then she's citing sources because the metaphor she's using from something else
Yeah.
and applying it to her. So how awesome of her to make sure that she again, another way that she takes her story and puts it into a bigger context.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's one thing she did with footnotes that I really liked. So on page 66 of my book, there's a footnote. Where is it?
Man, Angelique marked that thing up.
I know. I'm so
I don't
proud
even
of
have
her.
the book. I had to steal yours to read a prologue.
So the footnote is girl mistakenly elopes with the wrong lover. So that was when I realized that she was going to end up with Val, because it's when they separate. It's when the woman in the dream house breaks up with Val, and
Foreshadowing.
yeah, I like that. I like that
I
she
missed
used these
that.
tropes that we're just trying to pay attention to, like, oh yeah, it's universality. It's like tropes are tropes for a reason, but no, she used it as like tropes also have happy endings sometimes, and this is part of
Her
that.
little
Yeah.
foreshadow. I like that.
Yeah.
Kendall said foreshadowing.
Yeah,
That's exactly
foreshadowing.
Angelique, I love you and I love your brain.
But also, the tropes thing. So on page 233, there's this quote that I think it's maybe part of how she ends the book. Let me. Dream house as cliche. And the quote is, "This triteness, this predictability has a flattening effect, making singularly boring what is in fact a defining and terrible experience." So tropes play against her and they work for her.
Mhm.
So, and she just kind of brings it all together.
Because opposite things can be true at
Yeah,
the same
yeah.
time.
Yes.
We're gonna get Kendall a T-shirt that's okay.
Please do.
Because yes,
That's my
every
like-
time you say it, it's like it's almost like I was right. See, it keeps coming up because you're so right. You're so 100% right.
Thank you. I don't get that much.
You're also a good mom, okay?
Thank you.
Because I know that was probably a reference to your children, but no, it's not.
No, I'm
Oh,
just
okay,
the dumb
okay.
one in my family.
Oh,
Speaking
you're not
of,
the dumb one in your family.
well, you've
Lord.
never really gotten to know my siblings. They're all very smart. Side note, shout out to my siblings who definitely listen to this. Thank you, Bruce, for telling your friend Lindsay and her mom to listen to this too. I love you.
I love when was it Tinley was like, I'm gonna add Andrew and Angelique on Facebook because I feel like we're like I know them like you know them now. And I was like,
Yeah.
that's what I tell people. We said in the last one, like, people, how you guys like, how do you act when the microphones are off? I'm
Like this.
pretty much like this.
Yeah.
So you do know us.
My sister wants you, Andrew specifically, to do a like little book club with her daughters because she thinks that it would be hysterical.
Warning to Tinley. The one thing that does get it's not really warning because I've been bleeped out several times now on this podcast. But it would take a lot of energy. It takes a lot of energy to not say 4-letter words. So
They're big kids.
they're big kids. Okay.
Say no, they're big kids. They're
Oh,
10
no.
and 8.
How old are they now?
10 and 8.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed the 10 and oh my god.
Well, it's because my voice went out. Sorry.
10 and 8.
They're big kids.
And again, we've only aged 5 years. This is so amazing how this
weird.
works out.
I
Yeah.
know.
Well, your son turned 3 yesterday. My
I
nephew turned 5
know.
yesterday. Can you believe that? God.
My dad turned 76 today. If that
Oh, happy
Happy
birthday!
birthday, Angelique's dad. We love you.
Yay.
Thank you for, being born and
Yeah.
allowing Angelique to be born.
Exactly. Well, happy birthday, man! There's all these birthdays. This is September's
I
a busy birthday month. I
know.
love it.
One of my friend's kids was also born on this day.
Oh wow!
I'm not really sure. I think he's like 9 or 10, maybe 11. I'm not
Nicole's birthday was last week. Nicole, one of our lovely staff members, was last week.
I love Nicole.
So yeah, that's really cool. This is a big April for us in our family. Do y'all have like a month in your family?
yeah.
April is ours. We have like 15 birthdays in April plus tax season, so you're broke by May. And then my
February,
birthday
November.
month is actually just the beginning of
Kendall's
birthday month.
month. Woohoo.
So,
So,
are any final thoughts, anything about the book that you wanted to share that we haven't shared?
go to Andrew first. I'll go through my notes.
Andrew.
no, I again, I would recommend this. I think it's one of those everyone needs to read.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone needs to understand.
Mm-hmm.
Read the footnotes. That's my
Mhm.
recommendation is read the footnotes. Because even I read the footnotes and I missed Angelique's brilliant foreshadowing reference. So because I'm not a brilliant English major like she is. So, but definitely read the footnotes. And I think this is an encouragement for me to. I don't read a lot of memoirs.
Yeah.
There are two things I don't read a lot of historical fiction, which the book club is helping with that.
Mm-hmm.
Now the last two I read I hated, but but that's okay. It's not. And then I don't read a lot of memoirs. I listen to a lot of the funny ones. Like I love listening. Like I listen to like the Billy Crystal one and some of the Amy Poehler and the Mindy Kalings because they're funny and they're light and all that kind of stuff. But I bet that there are other memoirs like this, not necessarily like this, but that tell a story that maybe I'm not aware of. And I need to do more of that and understand more people's story. How can I be a good librarian if I don't understand people's story?
Yeah.
Like, I think as a librarian, I do try to read different books. Like, I hate YA, but every once in a while I'll throw in a YA. Like, I'm reading the new it's not new anymore, but Becky Albertalli and Adam Silvera. It's a follow-up. It's called Here's to Us because now they're college, so really it's more like new adult. But still, I'm like, you need to read different things and understand different stories because otherwise it helps you better understand and serve these people who come through the door who aren't your story.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go into the 306.76s because that's the call number. And I'm going to find more books that talk about stories that maybe I'm not familiar with and open my eyes. That's what this one taught me to do.
It'll make you a better archivist.
A better archivist, yes.
Is that how you say that word?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It'll make you a better one.
I like it. So that's what this is. And again, and I mean, I love to read. I tell people one of the reasons I don't read historical fiction is I actually like just reading a history, like a David McCullough, may he rest in peace, a really well-written 940s book versus a historical fiction. So I don't know where I was going with this. Crap.
You're going to go now to, you were going to go back to this call number because you were talking about 940s?
I don't remember now. It went away.
I was trying.
I don't remember.
Uh-oh, he's running out.
I know. I tell you, it's so fast, y'all. It's just mush. I really don't know where I was going with that.
Did you have something?
Okay, she just cut. She's like done with you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. So I guess I just wanted to say I really appreciate how vulnerable she was. I think that this is a tough conversation to have, and it stinks that she had to go first in order for us to have this conversation. But I really appreciate her vulnerability, and Andrew made me think of something else, but I forgot it. So
This is just evolving as we sit here. That's just going, just like. We had some good thoughts, though. I want that to be known before we devolved into mush here. Corners.
Angelique's still strong. What do you got?
Oh, no, I'm out, too.
This book is emotionally draining. Let's just say that.
It's a hard book to read. It's a book you should read, but it's a hard book to read.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And now I'm going to go read something light and, like,
Aren't we reading a fluff book next month?
We're reading a Colleen Hoover book.
Isn't she fluff?
No, not from the synopsis I saw.
But it's
That's
like
okay.
a fast, like people like it's like an addictive type thing, right?
Yeah.
Let's
so
find
because
out.
my book club book's called Rock Paper Scissors by Alice Feeney. I think she's a Scottish author, or she's set in Scotland. But it's like a thriller, killer, diller, and it's kind of twisted. One of the ladies in book club was like, "It's twisted," and the way she said it was just. But I also think though it's a palate cleanser because even though it's twisted. It's like something it's supposed to like be entertaining.
Yeah.
/ twisted. Although I don't tend to get entertained by twisted stuff, but it tends to move fast.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm hoping it's at least a brain. I need to go read like a really trashy novel, but that's like cheesy, trashy romance novel or something. Just completely like. Yeah. Not like a romance novel. Like, I'm not going to read a Bodice Ripper. Although I will say, maybe I shouldn't reveal this, but Kindle is the best at reading the backs of cheesy romantic paperbacks.
I was just thinking about that. Oh my gosh.
We used to have so much
times.
fun of her, like just how ridiculous they are. But you know what? Sometimes you need that. Maybe I'll just read the back covers, and that'll be enough to cleanse the palate. Here,
Angelique needs to show you on Instagram. There's a Great Library Displays post where it's someone using a filter to change the faces of romance novels.
Oh, I love it. Oh, that's awesome.
Go check it out.
I did see one where it's like men with their shirt off, like on the front cover. That was a library display or something like basically like the many faces of Fabio or something like that. Like all the Fabio books on display. I thought that was funny. So,
yep. All right, are we good? We're done.
Yeah. We did it.
We did it. We made it through.
An hour and 11 minutes.
Oh.
I'm so sorry, audience.
You can edit
Thank
out
you
some
for
of our...
sticking with us.
Yes, thank you.
All right. So before we go, I'm going to just do a little promo here. It's a special promotion for this podcast considering the subject matter of the book. The Hope United Survivor Network is a Gaston County community collaborative focused on providing victims and survivors of domestic violence, human trafficking, sexual assault, and elder abuse a safe and secure place to get the help they need. You can find more information about this collaborative, including contact information and an emergency number, at www.hopeunitedgaston.com. As part of their efforts to support and provide for victims and survivors, Hope United will be holding a fundraising event called Threads of Hope, featuring a presentation and book signing by Stephanie Land, author of Made, Hard Work, Low Pay, and a Mother's Will to Survive. The event will be held at Veronay Vineyards and Winery in Kings Mountain on Thursday, November 3rd at 5:30 p.m. This is a paid event. It is a $50 a ticket, and you can find more information on the Hope United website. Our Friends of the Library is actually a sponsor for the event. And once again, you can find more info at www.hopeunitedgaston.com.
I am attending. I'm really looking forward to it, and it's a local caterer, like out of the Highland community. So, and this is her first big event, and apparently the food is fantastic. So, yeah, Tara and Molly and the whole team over at Hope Survivor just do an absolutely incredible job and do a really hard job. So the Friends of the Library, I can say this because I was a part of making that Emily and I were a part of. We met with them and figured out how to get the Friends to sponsor it. We are very proud to sponsor it. It's an author event, which the Friends of course love. Stephanie Land read that book, watch that series on Netflix. Again, it's an important story that you need to hear. But we are really excited to sponsor this event. So please come out and see us. I know it's $50. I know that some people couldn't afford that, and I totally understand. But if you can, this is a really great way to support an organization here in Gaston County that is necessary, that is essential, and needs every dime that they can get to help people here. So
yeah,
I'm excited about the program, and I'm excited to have an opportunity to support this organization. So,
all right. That's it for this month's We're Booked Up. In the Dream House is available both in the library, online at the NC Digital Library, and on the Libby and Hoopla apps. Let us know what you think of the book and what you think of what we think of the book. Just leave a comment at the Off the Shelf blog at gastonlibrary.blogspot.com or at gastonspeaks.podbean.com. Next month's book is November 9 by Colleen Hoover. So look forward to that. All right, we're done.
Thank you,
Thank
guys.
you, Angelique. This was always for surviving our mush. So
you're welcome. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.